Guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode is all about the 2023 ICD-10-CM Coding Guidelines Challenge Explained. If you are brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue, I'm a medical coder. Okay guys, so October 1st, I issued an official challenge on my channel. And I said that the challenge is that you will read the 2023 ICD-10-CM Coding Guidelines in their entirety 4 times in the month of October. So this breaks down to 1 time per week. Little did I know. This challenge has been being met with some resistance, obviously, but not as much as resistance as I thought. But there's also a lot of questioning and a lot of overthinking. So I want to explain a couple of things, and I want to talk about ways to make it a little bit easier for yourself. And one of the reasons that I say to do this is, here's the thing. These are the brand new coding guidelines. The beginning of the fiscal year starts October every single year. So every single year is when the new guidelines, of course, are out in the books. Okay, so that's something that you have to know. In the life of a medical coder, this is an important time for us. October is always an important time because everything is new again. Okay, so this is when all of these new coding guidelines go in effect and all of those types of things. So it's a really good way to stay on top of, just your work, right? And this is good for students and veteran medical coders. This is not just only for students. It is for everyone. And the thing that it gets me is this. People are overthinking a challenge. You're overthinking a challenge, and for some of you, it has literally paralyzed you from even starting, or you start and then you stop. And then you say, well, Blue, I don't think I can do this. I'm still reading, and I'm still going through, and it's been over a week and I'm still reading the coding guidelines. Guys, if you can get through the coding guidelines and it takes you the entire month, that is totally fine. The goal of a challenge is to dig deep within yourself, go above and beyond what you normally do so that you can push yourself. And when we push ourselves to learn more, obviously we grow as medical coders. I want people who come to my channel to be strong medical coders. Not coders who want things spoon-fed to them. Not coders who want everything just handed to them. And I see that a lot, unfortunately. I want you guys to be strong. Meeting the challenge of reading the coding guidelines is the first step. It is the first step to, 1, getting discipline, which a lot of students and a lot of medical coders need. They need this because to be disciplined, it will lead you to be able to do things that you didn't think that you could be able to do before. But once you establish that discipline, it can go a long way to helping you becoming a sharper medical coder, a better medical coder, because that's what it's all about. Even for myself, I have been a medical coder since 2008, and I still strive to learn because I don't know everything. And I don't pretend to know everything, and I will tell people all the time, I learn every single day. This is what I want for all of you. This is my fervent wish for all of you, that you become better students, more disciplined students, and that just because you come up to a little bit of adversity, that you don't stop. You keep going and you dig deep and you don't give up just because it's taking you a little bit longer. Now, it took me a full 7 days to get through those coding guidelines, but I have a lot of things going on. Like everybody else, I still managed to squirrel in the time. Have I been through the coding guidelines before? Of course. But this is the first time I've actually sat down in a really long time and went through the entire guidelines. And like I said, I had to break it up over a few days. There was some days that I did miss. So I had to go back and pick up the pace on a couple of those days, because when you miss time, you got to make it up, right? But I still made that time for it. So it is possible to be able to do this. And again, even if you are only able to make it through twice in a month, that's 2 times that you went through something, and it's making you better at processing information. And while you may not understand, and that's what's stopping a lot of you, is You don't understand it. You want to read and understand it. These books were created by doctors and a lot of other scholars. So there's some really heavy stuff in there. And I will also say this, doctors often do not understand these guidelines. That's why we come in. That's why we need to understand. Nurses often have a hard time understanding these things as well. So if you are finding yourself struggling, you think about that. People who have years of schooling still struggle to understand those coding guidelines. But the only way you're going to be able to understand them is by keep reading. You are not going to understand them. It will not make sense to you the very first time you go through it. And even the second time you go through it. And even the 10th and the 20th time you go through it. It will still not make full sense until you get into the real world and you start having to apply that stuff. I got a question today from a viewer about diabetes coding. The first thought that came to my mind was, did you not look at your coding guidelines? The coding guidelines clearly states her question, the answer to her question. Literally. That was a very easy fix. This is a certified medical coder asking this as well. So that's my thing. If a certified medical coder does not know this and is still asking questions about diabetes, of all things, and didn't consult their coding guidelines, this is an issue. So that's why I say on my channel, I want people to come here and be strong, to get strong. When I see people saying, oh, what is the link for the coding guidelines? I don't answer anymore. I do not. Because I have left the link before for the coding guidelines. I am not going to spoon feed folks anymore. I have the same access to Google as everybody else. We all have the same access to Google. And before you think, well, Blue, that's just mean. When you repeat yourself about 100 times a week, then come and talk to me and see how you feel. Because I am incredibly patient when it comes to trying to help people. I will also tell people this is where you can find it. And I still get people, where do you find it? Where do you find it? Guys, come on. Because in the real world, no one will help you. You will find people, you will find other medical coders who will not help. And I'm not saying this to run people off. I'm telling people this so that they know what the reality is going in. People are going to expect you to know how to look up the answers. And if you can't do a simple Google search of the ICD-10-CM 2023 coding guidelines, again, what is the problem? Because you are going to have to know these. And it doesn't have to make sense, guys. Just read it and keep reading it. And if you find yourself, when you're reading these coding guidelines, you get tired of reading. I hear that a lot too. Well, Blue, I get so tired of reading. Okay, are you laying down in bed? Well, yeah. Okay, that's your problem. You need to set yourself up for success. Be sitting up in a chair, be at the kitchen table or at your desk, wherever you sit at in your house. And you need to be there and get into that mind focus of doing the coding or reading the coding guidelines. So that way your brain knows, okay, we're in work mode. We're not in sleepy time mode. We're not in, okay, we can lay in bed and just read the book because we'll fall asleep. I know I fall asleep when I read in bed. There's sometimes when I can get away with it, but there's a lot of times I can't because as soon as I hit that bed, I want to go to sleep. So I know I have to be at my desk or I have to be at my other desk and I have to be paying attention. And that's the only way for me to be successful, to give myself breaks. This is why I say, even if you want to break it up over a few days, if you're reading from the book, it's 36 pages, I believe, and you can break it up into 5 pages per day, right? 5 pages so that you're reading front and back. So you're reading a total of 10, but you're reading these 5 pages a day. And it's going to take you a few minutes. It's going to take you some time. It took me some time as well. But the thing that happens when you are reading these coding guidelines consistently is that you are going to become a faster reader. Your brain is going to be able to process information more quickly because you are training it to take in a lot of words. There's a lot of students that tell me, well, Blue, where can I find workbooks with big, op notes and things like that? If you don't know how to do the small parts of medical coding, as far as like noting your guidelines or even looking up diagnosis codes and procedure codes, then again, that's also another issue that you need to work on, because you can't just jump into the deep end of the pool and expect it all to make sense, because it's not going to. Okay, so with that in mind, you want to make sure that you break it up as much as you need to. If you are downloading the coding guidelines from CMS, it is 100+ pages, but again, you can divide that over however many days you want to take to read that. And then if it's a week, if it's 7 days, or if you only want to do it twice in the month, you can do it over 14 days. However long it takes you to do this is however long that you are, going to give yourself to do this. And if you miss a day, you just miss a day. It doesn't mean that you have to stop the challenge. Okay, guys? It means that you need to make sure that you make the time to get into it, because if it is important to you, you will do this. Now, for all of my 80s babies out there who remember the movie Karate Kid, right? Who remembers the movie Karate Kid? Well, you remember when the Karate Kid is trying to learn from Mr. Miyagi all the things about karate, and he wants to get in there and he wants to start learning moves and things like that. Mr. Miyagi sends him out and he makes him paint the fence. He's like, you need to paint the fence first. Paint the fence first, and then I'll teach you. He's like, well, okay. So he goes up, down, and he starts telling him to do particular moves. And so he says, okay. So he starts doing this, and he starts doing other things around to appease Mr. Miyagi. So then he finally gets upset and he says, I'm doing all these chores, and I'm not learning any karate. You just want me to do chores around here. I quit. And he's like, okay, show me paint the fence. So he starts doing the moves of painting the fence. All along, he's learning how to do karate, and he doesn't even know it. It is the same thing when I'm challenging you guys to read the coding guidelines. I'm challenging you to become disciplined. I'm challenging you to make the time to read the coding guidelines. I'm challenging you to find the coding guidelines. Because again, I'm not going to put the link anymore to the 2023 ICD-10-CM coding guidelines that I have told you all is very easy to find through Google. And I've told you directly where to go, CMS. And the more disciplined you get by doing this, the stronger you will be in the real world when you have to deal with your peers who have more experience than you, who have bigger egos sometimes than you. And also, it'll prepare you for dealing with providers, because providers are going to want to know why. When you tell them, or when you're educating them about the importance of documenting, the depth of a pressure ulcer, or, how big is this wound, or whatever the case may be, what stage is their CKD, the patient's CKD, why are these things important? The guidelines will back you up. The guidelines were written by their peers. And then you can say, this is where I got it from. These are the coding rules. This is why. Instead of being ill-prepared and being a medical coder who says, oh, I don't know. Yeah, okay, you could do whatever you want to. It doesn't work that way, guys. It does not work that way. We have to be prepared. And for all this foolishness and nonsense about, oh, AI and this and that, AI will never have the critical thinking that a real human will have. Never. So again, this is why we need to be prepared. It's not enough to sit there and be like, oh, that's just a status quo. No. This is where we can step in and say, you know what? I'm going to learn this by simply reading the guidelines. It is multifold, the things you're going to get by the end of the month if you stick with this challenge. Because once you stick with this challenge, and even if you only get through it twice, folks, that's okay. It's okay. Because it's more than what is expected. Right? And for those of you who want to write them out, oh, I love that. I love hearing that. I love hearing that there's people out there who are actually writing out the coding guidelines. Now, I didn't say this. I did not suggest this. I said, if you want to do it, that's great. I didn't even mention it the first time. I was waiting for the feedback of, oh no, I don't want to read it. But then some people said, no, Blue, I learn better when I write it out. Hey, if you want to do that, that is wonderful. that means you are really going to grasp it. Because even if you don't write out the whole thing, let's just say this. Say that you're reading the coding guidelines and you want something that's going to stick, like the sepsis guidelines, right? And you say, okay, well, as I'm reading the sepsis guidelines, I'm going to write out just the sepsis section this time, on this round of writing out of reading the coding guidelines. I'm going to write out the sepsis section, and then I'm going to continue to read. Now, what did you just do? You tricked your brain into thinking two different ways. You are giving your brain multiple things to focus on. So guess what's going to happen? It's going to stick a lot better, and it's going to make more sense, and you're going to be able to recall it better because you just did two things. You read and you wrote. Now, you don't have to do the whole thing, because if you did the whole thing, some people will just stop. But if you want to do just one passage at a time when you're reading, say you get through the rest of the guidelines and you just read the rest of the guidelines. Well, you've already wrote the sepsis guidelines out, but let's just say you want to write out the one about the diabetes on the next time that you read. So when you're reading again, you can write out all the diabetes one, right? Or split it in half because it's quite big. And then continue to read the coding guidelines. You see? That's just one more thing, another facet of study that you just incorporated into reading the coding guidelines. Now, you're not going to get bored because now you have an activity to do, right? So, and it's not writing out the whole thing again. It is literally just writing out one section. And whatever section that you feel is troublesome to you, or maybe you really like that section. There's one about the facetious disorder that I like to read because I find it fascinating. I find the behavioral health section very fascinating. Of course, you guys know I love the injury section of the book too because I'm an orthopedic and podiatry coder, so I love that section. And so there's things about like hurricanes, right? Coding for hurricanes, the external causes and things like that. And maybe that's an interest of yours that you want to write that out. So again, you don't have to write out the whole thing, but you can write out different things every time that you read, right? So that's just something that, to do it, to change it up. But if you want to just read it, that is totally fine. If you want to listen to it, some people have told me they've been able to listen to the guidelines, that's okay too. But again, the challenge is to read the coding guidelines. That's the challenge, because reading it is going to make you, again, think about reading faster and faster. Because what's more words than that? Because the guidelines are a lot more words than reading the op notes, right? And you're going to have to read those op notes when you are in your exams, because there's going to be an op note section. Doesn't matter one of the 4 exams you take, CCS, CCSP, or CPC, or the CCA. They all have an op note section on there. But again, if you've been reading those coding guidelines, it's going to make you quicker when you're reading those coding guidelines, when you're reading those op notes, because you've already learned how to read large sections of words quickly. And just because you don't understand it the first pass, just because you don't understand it the second pass, or maybe even the 15th pass, doesn't mean that you won't understand it. Because that's what it takes. This is the heavy lifting, guys. That's what this is, the heavy lifting. And this is where you're going to get a lot of people drop in like flies because they think, oh, well, this is too hard. This is too hard. It's not too hard. It's not too hard. This is going to give you that good foundation. And a lot of people always ask me, how do I become a better medical coder, Blue? Oh, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I love what I do. I love what I do. That is undisputed. And this is what I have done to discover that love, to get good at what I do. Because I know I'm good at what I do. But I got that way through hard work, through study. That's the challenge that I give to you. Study, and I'm telling you how to do it. Read the coding guidelines. And again, if you read them only one time, that's good because you still met the challenge. If you read them twice, still great because you still met the challenge. If you do it 4 times, wonderful. Again, you met the challenge. Don't give up if you're reading the coding guidelines. Don't give up if you get frustrated because you don't think you're reading fast enough. Do you think those Olympic gold medalists were just number one when they first started? No. It took time for them to develop. Like any professional athlete, it took hours and hours and hours for them to get that good. It is the same thing with medical coders. It's going to take us time to get good. It's going to take us time. It's going to take us a few falls, but it's as many times as you get back up. So read the coding guidelines. Do not make it hard for yourselves. Just do it. That's all I'm going to say. If you have read today or this week, leave me a blue heart in the comments. So that way I know, hey, you're out there and you're still working this. Because yes, you can. Yes, you absolutely can. And I had another show planned for today, which I was going to talk about, but this came up. So I wanted to make sure that this is clear because this is still my challenge. It's still my baby. And I want to make sure that people know that if you fall a little bit, it's okay. It doesn't mean that you're out of the race. Pick that book back up and keep going and get into it. Read the coding guidelines. That's all I'm saying. If this video helped you, please like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see y'all again. Bye.